First, if you can all just assure that your microphones are muted. So thank you everybody for joining CHERS today for a presentation on HUD's ESG-CV regulations and ESG-CV vouchering. A couple housekeeping items as we get started. First, please note we are recording this webinar and will post to our website for reference for those who are unable to attend today. Second, we ask that you please hold your questions until the end. Let's get started. As many of you know, HUD released the ESG-CV regulations on September 1st. CHERS has reviewed these regulations in depth and attended webinars, and we have gleaned information that is relevant to all of you in operating ESG-CV funded projects. The purpose and goal of this presentation is 1. To review opportunities and waivers in ESG-CV regulations that impact your projects, and 2. To provide a high-level overview of vouchering process. Please note that CHERS will send a PDF of this PowerPoint, a summary of the regulations, and a list of frequently asked questions this week. During this presentation, we're going to start by defining ESG eligible activities as an overview and reminder, although you are very familiar with all of these. We will then provide an overview of the ESG-CV regulations, including requirements around spending down, additional eligible activities, and waivers and flexibilities. We then are going to review your projects and answer any questions on your projects based on these new regulations. Finally, we are going to provide a high-level overview of the vouchering process, including CHER's role in this process. As a refresher, on this slide are the ESG eligible activities. The first is street outreach, which includes reaching out to unsheltered homeless individuals and families, connecting them with emergency shelter, housing, or critical services, and providing them with urgent non-facility-based care. The second is emergency shelter and includes renovation, essential services, and operations. The third eligible activity is rapid rehousing. Eligible costs include rental assistance and housing relocation and stabilization services. Next is homeless prevention. Eligible costs include rental arrears and assistance, and housing relocation and stabilization services. Just a reminder here that prevention costs can be used for ongoing rental assistance for at-risk households. And finally, HMIS and administrative activities of the recipient. Moving on to ESG-CV, the CARES Act designates $4 billion for the Emergency Solutions Grant Programs. Funding was designated to prevent, prepare for, respond to, and mitigate the impact created by the coronavirus for households entering and currently utilizing the homeless service system. Now, we're going to review the ESG-CV regulations. As previously mentioned, the regulations were released on September 1st of this year. Note that this document is itself a waiver document. Overall regulations are still based on the original ESG regulations. The notice is divided into 7 sections, which we will summarize verbally today. In addition, CHERS has drafted a summary document that we will send out after this presentation. In terms of program components, all regular ESG requirements apply, except 1, the emergency shelter and outreach cap is waived. We anticipated that this would be the case, but now this is codified. 2, pre-award costs are eligible. This is important if you are an agency who is interested in utilizing funds, for example, hazard pay, for costs you have already incurred. Specifically, the regulations state that you can cover and reimburse costs after the date the community first began preventing, preparing for, and responding to coronavirus, provided the costs were incurred addressing the coronavirus. An important tenet of the ESG-CV regulations is that funds must be used to prevent, prepare for, and respond to coronavirus among individuals and families who are homeless or at risk of homelessness. In addition to the activities allowable under ESG guidelines, the following activities are newly allowable under the ESG-CV regulations. We're going to take a minute to describe each one, as you may be interested in utilizing funding within your projects for these activities. 1. Temporary emergency shelters. This means any structure or portion of a structure which is used for a limited period of time because of a crisis, such as a natural disaster or public health emergency, to provide shelter for individuals and families displaced from their normal place of residence or sheltered or sheltered or unsheltered locations. Eligible costs include leasing, acquisition of real property, renovation, operations, and services. 2. Training. Funds may be used for training on infectious disease prevention and mitigation for staff working directly to prevent, prepare for, and respond to coronavirus among persons who are homeless or at risk of homelessness. 3. Hazard pay. Funds may be used to pay hazard pay for the recipient or subrecipient staff working directly to prevent, prepare for, and respond to coronavirus among persons who are homeless or at risk of homelessness. 4. Hand washing stations and portable bathrooms. 5. Landlord incentives. Allowable as reasonable and necessary to obtain housing for individuals experiencing homelessness. For example, signing bonuses up to 2 months' rent, security deposits up to 3 months' rent, paying to repair damages, and costs of extra cleaning. And 6. Volunteer incentives. Allowable to pay incentives to volunteers such as cash or gift cards who have been or currently helping to prevent necessary street outreach, emergency shelter, essential services, and housing relocation and stabilization services during the coronavirus outbreak. We're now going to discuss waivers, requirements, and flexibilities noted in the notice. This is important for your agency so you know parameters that affect your project's implementation, including participant eligibility. First, in terms of emergency shelters, funding may be spent from the date the community began preventing, preparing for, and responding to coronavirus through January 31st, 2022. All other activities are eligible through September. In terms of rental assistance, under these regulations, short and medium-term rental assistance is allowed and is defined as 3 to 12 months worth of assistance. This differs from the normal ESG regulations, which allow rental assistance up to 24 months. In addition, the fair market rent requirement for units is waived. Units may be approved if they meet rent reasonableness. If you have any questions about how to determine rent reasonableness, please reach out to us as we are happy to help. Moving on, hotel and motel costs are eligible solely under the emergency shelter activity. Hotels and motels can be utilized for ongoing shelter and or for quarantine or isolation of those in other housing programs. Additionally, funds can be used to pay for cleaning and repairing damages caused by program participants above normal wear and tear of the room. There's also a waiver to the 24-month assistance over 3 years cap. Participants who reached the 24-month cap between January 21st, 2020 and March 1st, 2021 can receive continued assistance for up to 6 months in order to maintain housing or prevent homelessness. Finally, legal services are limited to those necessary to help program participants obtain or not lose their housing. As an overall reminder, costs may only be spent as necessary to prevent, prepare for, and respond to coronavirus. Program requirements. The regulations also go through program requirements. This is important for your agency so you know HUD's expectations in implementing your projects. In terms of housing stability case management, HUD is waiving the requirement that housing stability case managers meet not less than once per month. This waiver is allowable through the period of the recipient or subrecipient uses funds to prevent, prepare for, and respond to coronavirus. HUD also requires recipients to establish procedures to prevent duplication of benefits provided through any and all federal funding streams. Finally, although HUD strongly encourages the use of supportive services when necessary, individuals and families experiencing homelessness must not be required to receive treatment or perform any other prerequisite activities as a condition for receiving services. We also want to make sure you're aware of some of the policy priorities HUD emphasizes in the regulations. First, subrecipients may include funding those not currently or previously funded through ESG. Also, HUD encourages a focus on supporting participants in obtaining independent living, sobriety, employment, self-sufficiency, and housing stability. Please note, however, again, that projects are prohibited from acquiring treatment or other activities as a condition of receiving assistance. Projects must also prioritize households based on need, which will be achieved by working through the coordinated entry system. And finally, funds must be used to prevent the spread of coronavirus and to quickly connect persons to housing. The first element of the ESG-CV regulations that we want to share with you is the requirements around spending down, or what HUD calls expenditures. It is required that at least 20% of funds, including first and second round allocations, must be spent by September 30th, 2021. At least 80% of funds, including first and second round allocations, must be spent by March 31st, 2022. And shelter funds must be spent by January 31st, 2022. This is important for your agency to know in order to plan accordingly for spending down. CARES will be supporting these efforts by creating a tracking process to ensure the community spends down by the deadlines. Ultimately, spending down by these deadlines is incredibly important for the community, as HUD could recapture funds if these deadlines are not met. We also want to note if you are having trouble spending down or are seeing needs in the community that differ from what we anticipated, you can request to move funds to another eligible activity if approved by the recipient. There are two types of reports that are required for ESG-CV funds. CAPERs are due 180 days from program year end. Quarterly reports are due 10 days after the end of each calendar quarter. While the recipient and/or CARES will be conducting these reports, we will be reaching out to agencies for any necessary information, such as a list of projects or activities conducted with the ESG-CV funds. Please be aware this information will be necessary for HUD reporting and plan accordingly. Please also note, domestic violence agencies will need to submit a CAPER and quarterly reports as an agency. We will now answer some frequently asked questions about the ESG-CV regs. Please note, we will be providing a document with these on our website that will be regularly updated. One, how do I document that funds are being used to prevent, prepare for, and respond to coronavirus? Answer, it is not required that you document that funds are being used to prevent, prepare for, and respond to coronavirus on a client-by-client basis. Rather, the recipient, for example, in this case, the City of Troy, will document this by providing documentation of when the community began preventing, preparing for, and responding to coronavirus activity per activity in IDIS. 2. Do the existing CARES Act waivers apply to ESG-CV funds? Answer, yes. However, they are set to expire at the end of September, which is today. HUD is working on extensions of the waiver. If your agency needs a waiver in the meantime, please contact CARES, who will work with you to submit a request to HUD Buffalo. 3. Am I allowed to utilize the waivers and flexibilities listed in the ESG-CV regulations for my normal ESG projects? Answer. It is allowable to apply ESG-CV regulations to ESG projects for funds used to prevent, prepare for, or respond to coronavirus, subject to many conditions. Please reach out to CARES if you are interested in utilizing ESG funds in this capacity. 4. Am I allowed to utilize prevention funding during the eviction moratorium? Answer. It depends. If someone would be at risk of eviction but covered by the moratorium, then they are not at risk of homelessness and thus not eligible for ESG-CV prevention assistance. If someone is at risk of eviction, even though they're covered by the moratorium, for example, a landlord trying to evict even though there's a moratorium, you can provide legal assistance. Document the circumstances that make the client eligible and at risk of becoming homeless. If someone is not covered by the moratorium and still at risk of homelessness, for example, evicted for reasons other than non-pay of rent, not on the lease, doubled up, moved more than twice in the last 60 days, or any of the other scenarios in at risk of homelessness definition, then they are eligible for eviction prevention assistance. Are there any questions related to Troy's ESG CV1 plan? Great. We will now review what you all applied for under the ESG CV funding as a reminder and open it up to any questions about your projects or planning for ESG CV2 funding given these regulations. So here is a reminder of the funding your specific agencies applied for CV1. Homelessness prevention, 51%. Emergency shelter, 34%. Rapid rehousing, 15%. For CV2, homelessness prevention, 78%. Emergency shelter, 9%. HMIS, 5%. And rapid rehousing, 8%. In terms of next steps, CARES will work internally between the grants and contracts and HMIS teams to set up your projects in HMIS. You will be notified when they are set up. CARES will be drafting updates to the written standards per the ESG-CV regs and will be presenting to the community for edits and approval. These updates may occur in addition to the updates already approved. ESG-CV vouchering and overview.
Hi everybody, my name is Maureen Van Duzen. I just joined the CARES team about 3 weeks ago. I'm part of the grants and contracts team. And so as Nick mentioned in the beginning, I just wanted to give a super broad overview of the vouchering process to hopefully make clear when and how you will be reimbursed for the funds that you've expended. And more information will come on the sort of nitty-gritty details of the vouchering process later. So just to start off, what CARES' role is in all of this. So the City of Troy is the grantee of these ESG-CV funds, and CARES is acting as the administrator on behalf of the city. So in that role, we're responsible for things like preparing contracts for signature, which you will be seeing very soon, overseeing the vouchering process, monitoring agencies, helping to complete final reports, as well as facilitating regular meetings with all agencies who have received subcontracts. So on that final note, we will ideally be reaching out to agencies soon to start setting up fairly regular meetings just so that we can see that everyone's projects are on track, that community needs are being met, and just to make sure that that 20-80% spend down that HUD is requiring is going to be manageable for everyone. So, you know, be on the lookout for more communication about that very soon. So in terms of the vouchering process, I just wanted to sort of lay out what that will look like, the timeline, so that you know what to expect when you submit. So I'll talk more about the vouchers, but all agencies will receive Excel vouchers for each of their projects, and they can submit those Excel vouchers for the costs that they're vouchering for, along with all of the relevant backups at the end of each month. We will review all vouchers on a monthly basis, and our goal is to have as quick of a turnaround time as possible with that review. So ideally within 10 days of receipt, you would be hearing from us whether your voucher has been approved or denied. And if there are any additional details that we need or any kind of clarification, our goal is to answer those questions as soon as possible. We will submit approved vouchers to the city, and then the city will mail checks directly to the agency. So that's sort of the flow of the reimbursement process. So then for next steps, as I mentioned, I don't want to get too into the weeds here with the specific details, but we have come up with a new process for vouchering that will allow us to pull reports much quicker and just keep more detailed records on our end. And so we're hoping that that's going to be a really streamlined process for everyone. But that will involve these pre-populated vouchers that we will be sending out to all of the agencies that will be pre-populated with the budget lines that you determined in your contracts. So those will be sent to all subrecipients upon execution of the contract. So again, you should be getting those fairly soon, most likely from me. So there's my email. To break down what that process will actually entail and some of the specifics that we will need in order for it to work, we are going to be inviting agencies to a webinar to talk more about the specifics of how to submit, how to fill out and how to submit those vouchers so that everything works correctly on our database and that we have all the information that we need. And, you know, it's a sort of simple process on both ends. So you can be on the lookout again for that training, hopefully, you know, very soon. I know that we are planning to get contracts out soon as well. So this process is moving right along. And of course, all the materials that we have about how to fill out the vouchers will be available to you after the webinar so that you can consult them anytime that you are filling out a voucher. And as you're filling out vouchers, or if you have questions before the next time that we meet, please don't hesitate to reach out to myself or Kirsten. We're happy to answer any questions about vouchering or eligible expenses or anything like that. And that's it for me.
Thank you, Maureen. So do people have any questions about what we've gone over today?
Yeah, I'm going to ask the question that I asked yesterday in the Albany group, timing. So we've already expended $93,000 in pre-cost with hazard pay, temporary housing, and supplies, and that was April, May, and June. So it's a while ago. So we're sitting on that cost. So we're very eager to get our cash flow going back. And I know there's a couple of providers who are in a similar situation on this call. So what's the realistic expectation for getting this going and getting funds that were already expended reimbursed?
Sure. So it'll be a little different than you heard on the Albany call yesterday. We're working this week, beginning of next week, to hopefully get the contracts out to you. And from there, we're going to ask for you to get your detailed budgets back to us so we can populate the vouchers and get the process going as quickly as possible. So I would say within the next 1 to 2 weeks.
That's great. Great to hear.
Thank you, Kevin. Are there any other questions? Anybody else think of anything? All right, well, we will be sending out our frequently asked questions document to you, as well as a summary of the regulations. And if you think of any other questions, feel free to email me.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone at CHER, for your great work. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Kevin.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.